Hey everybody, my name is Henry Barajas and I am the ringleader of this amazing circus of amazing people. I'm so happy everyone agreed to do this. Unfortunately, we can't do this in person, which I love San Diego. Going to San Diego Comic-Con has been something, it's like a summer camp for me. And I'm going to miss all the shenanigans and celebrating the medium. So here we go. Let's get to it. I'm going to start introducing my medley of guests. And we're going to start with Darcie Little Badger. Darcie, thank you so much for doing this. I know you've had such a rough year, and we all have. And I really appreciate you taking the time. Darcie is a Lipian Apache writer with a PhD in oceanography. Why are you in comics?
So I do have two sides. There's like my science side and my writer side, and I consider myself a storyteller because growing up I would read prolifically, but I would read both comics and like prose fiction. So I've always been a writer of comics and the long form, and actually interestingly in the same year I ended up selling my debut novel and writing my first ongoing comic series. I was a co-writer on Strange Lands with humanoids. So I mean, I'm in it because I truly love being a storyteller, and I love the visual aspect and the aspect of being a comic writer in particular.
That is beautiful. I think there isn't enough people like yourself. And here's your new book coming out. If you want to give a little shout out to what we can expect later this year.
Yeah, this is a Latsue. Latsue means hummingbird in the Lipan language. And it's about a teenager named Ellie. This is a young adult book. She's 17. And her cousin dies under mysterious circumstances. People think it was an accident, but she knows it was murder. So she ends up investigating his death and trying to seek justice for him. And also, as you can see on the cover, there's a bunch of little ghost dogs. And that's because she has this ability to wake up the ghosts of animals, not people, just animals, mammoths and trilobites, and dogs, including her best friend Kirby, who is an English Springer Spaniel, like my first dog, Kirby. So it's a fantasy mystery, and I hope y'all enjoy it.
Very excited. Can't wait to see it. Thank you.
And where can we get that? More importantly, I'm ready.
Oh yeah, I believe it can be pre-ordered really anywhere. I really I've been pushing you can order it from whatever local bookstore and kind of help them out, but big venues too. The links are on my Twitter, or just
cool.
If anyone's wondering, just tweet at me. I'll send you the links because I really love the support, honestly.
Good. Thank you. Our next guest here is Hector Rodriguez III, creator of the internationally renowned, award-winning Latino comic book series, El Peso Hero. Hector, thank you for taking the time. I know you should probably be on CNN right now.
En español, cine en español. No, actually, yeah, that was years back. No, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here in this amazing panel, amazing talent, honored, humbled. No, I mean, with El Peso Hero, it's a cross-cultural bridge. I mean, I was born in the border, and so it's one of the things that I really like to reflect and engage the culture, the language, the issues that are currently very important in impacting both sides of the border between U.S. and Mexico. And so I've been doing El Peso Hero 9 years. It'll be 10 years next year, so we're planning something big for that. Excited.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and so we'll be hitting 15 books next year. So I'm excited. I'm writing. I have a great team of artists as well, collaborating from Argentina, Mexico, U.S., Italy for a horror story. And so I just love the medium. I'm excited. I was born with El Santo, Calimán, and same time reading Mad Magazine with Sergio Aragones being a huge influence for me.
Great.
And yeah, you just keep it going.
Great. No, well, I mean, it's interesting to see this amazing series spanning 9 years, and just recently you've been on every news network known to, the news history.
Well,
And I think one of the cool things about what you're doing with this series and how it's finally getting a lot of notoriety is because this new story you're telling deals with migrant farm workers.
correct.
If you could talk a little briefly, I mean, we have 45 minutes.
Yeah.
If you want to just give a little brief shout out, or at least give us a taste of what people can read from your upcoming issue.
Right. And so it was, I'm small press, I'm indie. And so with that, there's pros and cons. A huge pro is that I'm able to pivot and engage. Yeah, I'm also an educator myself. And so it's important for myself to have a pulse in the community, go out and visit, speak, and engage, as well as making sure their voices are heard, through advocacy work, as well as engaging school districts here local in Dallas area. And so with the issue of essential workers, early on in the pandemic, there was great importance to protect our front line and, of our farm workers and our essential employees. It's personal connection for myself. Majority of my students, their parents are essential workers, as well as, they work in the service industry, agriculture, service, the food industry. And so it's one of the things that with this story about El Paso hero basically taking a supporting role in this, because it was around February, March, that I was getting some feedback from some fans, and they're like, they were joking. I guess they were joking, but it really started thinking, what is Paso Hero going to do with the pandemic? And I mean, listening to my artist from Italy, letting me know, Hector, bunker down, it's going to be rough. This was late February.
Yeah, no, that's exciting, and thanks for sharing. My next guest is Rhael Mcgregor, is a queer two-spirit comic artist and animator from Winnipeg. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
It's good to see you too.
Last time I saw you was in Toronto, and we were in a group of with a group of people that were all Indigenous to Canada. And when I was thinking about this, I mean, I was invited out because I had been working on a book with Jay Gonzo, who's on this call, and I'm not a card-carrying Native American, but my mother's side is Native, and it was interesting to see some of the similarities that we have. And if you can please just introduce yourself to our viewers.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Rhael Mcgregor. I'm fairly new to the comic scene. I primarily work in indie comics. I love writing romance comics, autobio, and some short educational works. And I really just, ever since I was young, working on a lot of stories, because I was really involved in storytelling and always knew that I was going to become a storyteller. And comics was the medium that ended up kind of choosing me. So I'm, I want to make stories that make people smile and educate people and talk about things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's interesting in coming from a perspective like yours, where, I mean, it's when someone sees you, and I don't know how you deal with this kind of thing, but I mean, you have this background and this heritage as a Native American, and in Canada, which has a complicated relationship with these Indigenous people. How do you navigate through that?
Oh, it's very complicated. I mean, of course, I have my own specific sort of dealings with everything, because I'm specifically Métis, and I'm also white passing, so I'm not usually seen as somebody who's Indigenous. So, you know, when I'm around people, usually I don't get racially profiled. But like, once people find out, all the questions start coming, all the racism starts coming out. It's a very complicated situation. I don't.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's something that people don't realize, and I really appreciate you opening up and talking about that, because it's something that we all have to deal with. At some, with either the racism, with, you know, when people hear me on the phone, they don't know I'm Mexican American, and when they see me, I have a completely different reaction. So
Mm-hmm.
I understand what you're going through, and I really appreciate you sharing. So as we move on, we have so many people to get to, and I really appreciate everybody keeping their responses brief. Next is Julio Annetta. Such an awesome guy, someone I've met online, who I've worked with, and we had a fun panel at New York Comic Con. It's good to see you. It looks like you can't get a haircut like myself right now, so.
Yeah, you know, I it's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me. You know, my wife gave me a pretty good fade at the beginning of this pandemic, but it's kind of grown out by now. But yeah, you know, it's a little rough here in New York right now.
Right. Yeah, and you come at this with a interesting background of being raised in Miami by Cuban and Colombian parents, and being in New York, having to talk about that Latinx identity and American life. If you could please open up a little bit about that. And I'm going to show a new project that you had sent me that I'm really excited by. So give me 1 second while you're talking about that.
Yeah, so like Henry said, I'm from Miami. I live in New York now, in Manhattan. And, you know, growing up in Miami from a Cuban and Colombian background, it's very different than, you know, moving to New York and traveling throughout the country. You know, it's an experience where, as a Cuban American, as a Colombian in a minority majority city, you don't really experience the same kind of racism that you see throughout the rest of the country. And as an adult moving to New York and traveling around the country, working in music, it was, you know, definitely more of an eye-opening experience as I, you know, experienced what it was like to be Latino in the rest of the country. You know, my comics generally touch on the intersection of American life and Latinx identity. The one that Henry's showing here is called Between Two Worlds, and it's one that I made with Jacoby Salcedo about a month ago now. And it's pretty much about the differences that white communities and minority communities in New York City have when it came to social distancing policies that were enforced by the NYPD. You know, I'm sure a lot of you guys saw images from New York throughout the country, but you know, there was one particular weekend where the city parks were just flooded with people. No masks, no social distancing, mostly, you know, I would say probably 95% of those people were white people. You had police officers going around passing out masks, which is great. That's what I think they should be doing. But then uptown, you had cops also from the NYPD violently arresting people who were wearing masks and were social distancing just for the reason of being outside. And that's what this comic, this mini comic that Henry's showing, kind of tackles.
Yeah, and if you're interested, you can go to your website, julioannetta.com/2worlds, and you just throw all this stuff up for free.
Yeah, so you know, so you know, I've been making mini comics for, you know, a little over a year now, and all of them have just been put up on my website for free. I think there's 4 now. There's going to be a 5th one soon. And really, it's just been a way for me to work with different collaborators and just kind of put out my ideas into the world for free without, you know, any barrier of entry for anybody. And also, you know, I have published works that are coming out next year and in 2023. I have a graphic novel. And I think especially for like an aspiring creator and somebody who's new in comics, making these mini comics and just putting them out there for free is a good way to just get the word out, hone your skills, and then also show publishers that, you know how to make a comic and you know how to tell stories. But yeah, go to my website, and I have a few mini comics up there that you can read.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And our next guest, it just keeps rolling. I'm sorry, everybody. There's just too many people, too many good people out there. We just really need to tone it down on how good we are. Next guest, Luke Martinez, raised in California. I met Luke at Latino Comics Expo. He was sitting next to me alongside Hector Rodriguez III. And you just never know what kind of friendships blossom at these cons. So I dearly miss seeing all of you in person. But Luke, you're a high school teacher and you're also a comic book writer. And tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days.
So yeah, ever since I had my meet cute there with Henry at the con, it's been pretty nice to get to meet all these people. Like I said, we were there with Henry and Hector, and I were on the same row, and that was super cool. Basically, I teach high school history and English. So a lot of times what I'm looking to do there is try to introduce kids both to, because where I live, the majority of the kids are Latinos, and most of them, like Hector said, most of the parents are migrant farm workers, trying to bring their own identities into it. And then using comics too. I also teach at a community college, and I teach history, and I actually like to use graphic novels when I find really good historical ones, like Levos de Mayo, So, but this is on my website. I've done The Ascendant, which is kind of a traditional graphic novel about superheroes. And then this is Daughter of the Underworld, which is a Latinx space opera I'm doing. And this is actually on submission, although there's a free preview on my website. You can see it right there.
Yeah, you can download it.
Yeah, you can download. That's just like a little preview image or preview comic. And then I have a web comic too called Storm Riders, which is because, and we talked to this, because I'm a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. I always wanted to do a fantasy comic, but I didn't always feel like everyone was represented. So my first character I came up with is down there in the corner, Alejandra. She is basically a mixture of Roman and Aztec, and she's an imperial bruja, and it's kind of like an adventure comic for in the D&D style. But like Julio, I put it up for free just because I want to try to get things made. When you're trying to put a lot of projects out and submit different things and get involved, I want to stay busy, and like, well, here's something I can do on my own, and I don't need, although I don't draw it. My artist, Joe Dabino, he's the one that does all the great art.
Thank you so much. And our next guest, Dr. Theresa Rojas, thank you so much for doing this. You are a writer, editor, artist, professor at Modesto Junior College. I mean, what don't you do? Honestly.
I try to do it all and then occasionally sleep,
Yes.
That's because I was trained by Dr. Frederick Aldama, so I'm catching up.
Such a great influence.
Yeah, I'm here in Modesto. Was the expo that you guys were talking about where you three met, was that in Modesto?
Yes, it
all
was.
Things converge in Modesto.
Right. And unfortunately, I know you were trying to start a new convention.
Yeah, actually, we were, I'm the founding director of the Latinx Comic Arts Festival. I co-directed the Latino Comics Expo in 2019, so that was kind of my training ground. And then I started my own festival, and we were 1 week away from our physical festival when it all went downhill, right? And we got the stay-at-home order. So I had my stickers, I had the buttons, I had everything. But that's all right, because we were able to do a little virtual version of it, just a very small version. And then I've been doing, I started something called C2, Creators in Conversation. So we're getting together, by we, I mean me, getting together creators, just talking to each other, having these conversations that you wouldn't normally see. And it's actually been really cool because I get to work with folks and open it up to a much larger audience because it's virtual. Folks don't have to be in Modesto in order to do it. So that's been a really cool learning experience for me, and I'm going to keep doing that. And we don't know what next year looks like. I would love to have our physical festival in March, but we are remote in the fall. The college is remote. We're probably going to be physically in Modesto on campus in the spring, but we don't know about, the group situation. So I'm already plotting a potential virtual bit. And what's showing here right now, so I created a kind of an art and literature zine, and I was inspired by the women of Saint Sucia, who are just absolutely fabulous people. My students were asking me if we had something at the college like Saint Sucia that they could contribute to, and I was like, no, but I can start something. So I started Calacas, which is dedicated to letting the skeletons out of the closet. And what you're looking at here is issue number 2, which will be out this summer. It's called Amores, and this is the cover art by one of our students, Larry Garcia II, who is just a phenomenal artist, and I'm hoping to collaborate with him on a comic sometime later this year.
Great. No, I'm so excited, and I'm sorry that your inaugural convention was postponed. And
I know.
I know
the
you're really
humanity.
excited about that. So.
But you know, I have everyone was so lovely and just so wonderful about, you know, the whole thing, and it's given me a chance to do something different. So I feel like the festival has grown even before we had our first one, right? And it kind of feels like the second one because we were all together for the expo. But it's already bigger than it would have been if we only had the physical festival. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Is I think someone said earlier, it might have been Julio, that, or maybe Hector, that this is now, you know, it's grown in different ways. I think it was Hector actually about the El Beso Hero, right? Mm-hmm. So because there's a demand for these virtual events. There's a demand for people being able to connect when they can't be there physically. So it's been a blessing in many ways.
Right. No. Well, yeah, I agree. And thank you so much.
Yeah.
Next is Jay Gonzo, Chicano artist from Cypress, California, who's in Phoenix, Arizona. I do have to confess that he drew my graphic novel, La Voz de Mayo, the Rambo, that's currently out through Image Comics and Top Cow Productions. But we were introduced because of his comic, La Mano Destino. If you could please, Gonzo, tell the world about how incredible your story is, and how you started to try to reclaim this this type of character that we see often in so many different stories.
Oh well, I think like the majority of people on the panel, I think doing my own project was started by a dissatisfaction with what was out there. Like every time I saw like lucha libre in American pop culture, it was kind of like a punchline or a joke, and these guys had been like heroes to me. So yeah, I just I wanted to put in the world the comic I wanted to see. Like I was sick of like luchadors being goofy or being a punchline of sorts, and also even like Chicano culture and specifically like Mexican culture being shown in these like dirty brown sepia tones that we see portrayed in American media. So I wanted to reflect the bright hues of Latino culture, and I wanted to present my heroes in a way that I thought was heroic. And I also wanted to appropriate a very American style of comic book telling that was the Silver Age kind of age of comics, and bend it to Latino sensibilities.
Yeah, I mean, often you see like a luchador detective or like a luchador fighting for no reason somewhere.
They're like hitmen sometimes, you see them as just kind of like bodyguards and hitmen. And I just wanted like something where the wrestling was important, where they like it was treated with respect, where the comic itself was kayfabe, there was a certain amount of like the wrestling is real in it, instead of this smart mark wink at the audience of like, oh, look how dumb this is. It was like, I just wanted to be like, look how cool this is,
Right. And you do this independently. So if somebody's watching this and loves luchadors and wants to read your book, how can they find it?
You can go to castleandkeypublications.com. I do have a web store, but I know that something has shifted with my shipping. So you can go to my store and buy comics. You can read the first 3 issues online, but honestly, there's a contact me. So just hit me up if you want to buy issues and I'll mail them to you. I've been doing that through the pandemic here. I've got a pretty flat rate of like $25 for all 6 issues, including shipping. Gets it out anywhere in America. I can get that to you, and I'll sign them for you for free. So yeah, just use the contact me button on my website, castleandkeypublications.com, and tell me you want to buy some comics, and I will tell you how to pay me, and I will get them in the mail.
There we go. Here, I found the website, Castle and Key Comics.
Yep.
And can they order them through their comic store? Because I know you have a Diamond account.
I did, but not anymore. I don't have
Okay.
Diamond anymore. So yeah, I'm gonna try to get the trade paperback into Diamond, but Diamond is shifting now that there is the emergence of the 2 new distributors that DC's using. So I don't know that Diamond's gonna have. I don't know what their requirements for small publishers are going to be, because right now they have a minimum of money they need to make on a book, and I'm kind of waiting for the dust to settle on on the industry before I really try to get that kind of distribution. But with the Kickstarter, I mean, with the trade paperback, I'm probably going to Kickstarter it. So your best bet, like, just follow me on social media and keep an eye out for where you can get like the trade paperback, and then hit me up if you want to buy issues. Is the short
Yes,
story.
hit him up. All right, thank you so much. And our next guest, someone who I've been following on Twitter for a long time and really enjoy what you're putting up there. Sonya Valentine, am I saying that?
Yes, yeah.
Please, and if you don't mind introducing yourself to the world, you have such a unique perspective on the internet, and I love what you have to say. So please, while I pull up something you sent me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like I'm sad that we're not all at San Diego, because we would go to the Cheesecake Factory after this if we were all there. But I imagine it's probably closed due to COVID.
Right.
But yeah, I am a writer, filmmaker. I'm based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. I do a lot of, just because I don't like being kept in a box, I do a lot of different types of writing. On screen right now is an anthology I helped write for, called Women Love Wrestling. It's about various fans, people in the business, talking about what wrestling, pro wrestling specifically, has done for women, either historically or not so historically, I guess. My story was about meeting the pro wrestler Edge when I was a little girl, and how he taught me I could basically be whatever I wanted to be. So it was like a Superman type story. I'm also wearing my Nyla Rose t-shirt because like it's a native panel, so I thought I'd do that. But yeah, like I am slowly getting into comics. I'm writing a graphic novel about the Manitoba activist Michael Champagne. I am hopefully doing a Star Trek novel in the coming months. We'll see. They haven't gotten back to me, but I'm like, I'm gonna keep bugging them because I want to bring back a character who died in Star Trek Picard. So that's my goal for 2020. But yeah, like I have a active Twitter at honey_child, where I talk about issues that affect mostly Indigenous women, but also women of color, and various nerd issues that affect us.
Right. No, that's exciting. And if you need help with that crusade to write a Star Trek story, please, I'll do anything I can to help make that happen.
Thanks.
No, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I think it's funny that a lot of us in Latinx and Native American cultures are so wrapped up in sports entertainment wrestling, and that's something I grew up on, and have a lot to say about that, and that's for a completely different panel. Thank you so much for doing this again. And last but not least, thank you so much. I did not know you were going to be able to make this panel because I got your email so late, Frederick, so that's why you're so you're the the last to introduce. But Frederick Louis Aldama, distinguished professor. He's the co-founder and director of SoulCon. He has written and edited over 40 books, and you have a new book coming out called The Adventures of Chupacabra Charlie, or it's already out.
It's out.
It's out. Congratulations. I feel like this is a big thing for you.
It is a big thing, and thanks for asking. And it's a big honor to be on this panel. Thank you, Henry, for inviting me. I love all of you guys, and I love your work, and huge respect to all of you. Yeah, The Adventures of Chupacabra Charlie is part of my Latino graphics series with OSU Press, and that series, first of all, is a series for all of you guys. If you ever want to publish with an academic press where we're getting kind of the goal, and Henry knows this really well, is to get our works into classrooms, because that's really the future for us. Get our books adopted into, you know, classroom settings. That's where the longevity is. But yeah, Chupacabra Charlie, he's so awesome, right? And a colleague did this really cool crocheted version. Chupacabra Charlie is a chupacabra, but he's a vegetarian. He's like super educated and cool, and he wants to go on an adventure, and he's on the other side of the wall with capital W, and he and Lupe meet a coyote, the animal, and they meet all sorts of cool folks, and they help him cross over the wall, and this like crazy cool stuff happens, and they use a silver key to free the children from the cages, which is my background right now. Anyway, it just dropped. This is like the most exciting thing I've done, like maybe ever. And
Wow.
I'm loving
You've
the
done
way
a lot
kids
of
are
things.
reacting. Yeah. So anyway, I love it. And I paired up with Chris Escobar, who's in our Tales from La Vida. A lot of you guys are in that. Latinx Superheroes, which you have up on the screen. I also loved, it was one of my, it was really like a passion project, and I was very honored and lucky to have picked up Eisner for Best Scholarly Work for that.
Yeah, I was there when you won. I was in the back, and I was like almost in tears, and I didn't even know you. We hadn't met at the time, but it was just so nice that I did not think you were going to win. No offense, but just
hey, I as you know, I went up there, and because everyone had prepared speeches, I didn't know you were supposed to do something like that. So I was as surprised as you, Henry.
No, totally. But again, yeah, I mean, I think we're like a lot of us have to. I think one of the things that I'm going to do a round robin question now, and then so that everybody can chime in. One of the things I think within Latinx and Native American creators is, and Frederick touched on this a little bit, but how do you feel, and is it your responsibility to talk about the struggles that your background has? So today, as we're filming, we just learned that the Supreme Court ruled that the current administration can't overturn the Dreamer Act, allowing people that were brought here to stay in the country and pursue an education. I know there are some members of our community who just want to make comics that are apolitical or that don't have anything to do with who they are. Is that something that you feel like you have a sense of responsibility for, or is that something that you don't really want to get into?
Well, personally, I think that all stories I tell do come from a place of political, not ideology, but from a political place, just because of who I am as a creative. Because I always wanted to see stories about people like me, and with stories about people like me, that often includes racism, that often includes sexism. Like I'm writing my first feature film, which is about pro wrestling. It's about these young girls who start a wrestling promotion on their reserve after their school burns down. And I was hoping I wasn't going to make it political, but it's largely about all the stuff I hated about when I wanted to be a pro wrestler as a kid. And the fact that I wasn't a white woman who looked like Sable, and I didn't have fake breasts, and I wasn't a petite little blonde woman. I couldn't be a pro wrestler. And so there's a lot of, I find myself trying to be like, well, let's tone down the politics for a while. But when I do, they inevitably explode out of my work. So it just naturally comes up in my case, usually.
Well, if I can add, I don't think that we have any particular responsibility to tell a particular story or kind of story. If anything, we are completely open to any stories, and we should be allowed to tell any story that we want to tell. But what I always say, particularly when I'm doing events, is that if you don't see the story in the world that you want to see, then you need to write it. If there's a particular story, whether it's about your own experience or your family or something that you want to see, and you don't see it, then write it. Or also in my case, create some kind of a bridge or a forum so that other people can tell stories through you. So when my students who were just completely in love with this comics event at our campus got so excited about Saint Sucia, and they were asking me, where can we, where is there something else, because Saint Sucia was ending at the time. And I thought, oh, well, I can do that. I have the resources, we have the technology, we can build it. So why not? And my students are about 55-ish% Latinx. And so this was, what a great forum. And the first issue of Calacas was Modesto stories. So not only were my students of color able to tell their stories through this, the ones who submitted, but it was also about Modesto. So we're focusing on stories coming out of the Central Valley, which we just don't see a lot of. And that was really exciting. And now that the larger campus, and it's too bad that we aren't in person, because it was starting to get some steam going into the Comic Arts Festival. But I think that what I'm trying to get at is that we can tell any stories that we want to tell, right? There are absolutely no limits. And with what Sonya was saying earlier about that she likes to write different kinds of things, I think that's fantastic, because then you're never pigeonholed as one particular thing, particularly as a Latinx or an Indigenous writer.
I have to say, so I'm Lip-On Apache, and at least I haven't read any young adult books with a Lip-On protagonist. So one thing I always worry about is somebody's going to read my book, which is a fantasy book, and think it's a textbook about how to be a Lip-On person and think that we're like some homogenous thing. So that's something that's always weighing on me. I'm always worried about that. It is difficult for me to create art in a vacuum, even fantasy, science fiction. I do find the things that I write to be influenced by my upbringing and by the histories of my mother, my grandmother. And whether that's intentional or not, I wouldn't trade it for anything else. And I do think it's important for me to be authentic to myself. So I wouldn't try to like write as if I wasn't Lip-On Apache, But yeah, we are all just different people. It's difficult when people put these expectations that you speak for all of the Native people in the United States. And first of all, there's like over 500 even just federally recognized tribes out there. And we're all different. Culturally, we're different, and individually, like, we're different people. I'm a huge nerd. I'm an oceanographer. Other Lip-On people, they have their own personalities too, so it's difficult.
Yeah, Darcie, to your point and to Sonya's point also, I think no matter what we do, our identity and our politics inevitably seeps into it. But as somebody who, most of the things that I write are, political, the next thing probably sounds a little hypocritical, but, we only ask this question of Latino people, of people of color, of Indigenous people. We don't ask this same question of white people. And I think that we should all feel free to write, whatever it is that we want to write, whether that's fantasy that just includes Indigenous characters or Latino characters and have nothing to do with, racism or, some sort of class or racial struggle. I think that we should feel free to do that. And I also think that when it comes to telling our stories, I think we also want to see ourselves in, the average rom-com movie and, playing any character that's not, the housemaid or, the nanny and all of these other roles that are really stereotypical to Latino people. So I feel like it's both things can be true at once,
Definitely. Does anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
I gotta. Oh, who was gonna talk?
Rhael?
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that Luke was talking earlier. I very much come from a very similar background in that I'm white and Indigenous, and so there's a lot of privileges that come with that, but also our own experiences. And for me as well, I grew up. My family never really introduced our culture to us, and so it was like 17 years of nothing, not knowing who I was and what was going on. learning about my culture now is a whole situation to wrap my head around, and trying to get that back as well, because like, you know, my grandmother does not want to even say that she's Métis. And so being able to, for a long time, I thought that I could not enter those political spaces and talk about my culture, because I felt like, oh, well, I wasn't a part of it when I was growing up. But I very much agree that that is like, that's its own story within itself, where, you know, it was taken from me as a kid, and from my mother, and from my grandmother, and from her mother. You know, it's a repeating cycle, and there's a story within that. But I'm, you know, I think I often tend to go towards stories that are very much, you know, like about representation and like all these things, but I'm sometimes a little bit scared to dip my feet into more serious topics. And I'm getting better and better, but because of the way that I was brought up, and that not understanding of who I am, where I come from, that for a long time kept me from doing a lot of those comics and speaking my mind about a lot of those things.
Thank you. And Gonzo?
Oh, I was just going to say, and I know you've heard me say this 1,000 times, but you know,
1,001 times.
All right, I think being marginalized or minority, or a marginalized minority, when you create, you can you know, you can fight your fight, or you can express your beauty, and I think that there's a time and a place for both of those, right? Like you can show them the culture that you're fighting for, or you can fight your fight, and I think they're both valid. You know, I think my only obligation as a creator, and the advice I've been giving a lot of like people who've asked me for advice lately, is just draw like you mean it. You know, whatever you're doing, just draw like you mean it, or write like you mean it, create like you mean it. Like it should be heartfelt. It should be what needs to come out of you. And whether that's you know, being political, or just being, you know, drawn silly luchadors, you know, like whatever you're feeling, you know, you're obligated to be honest to your emotion on the page, whatever that
is. Okay. Well, we are approaching our time limit, and I just want to thank everybody and allow everyone, and I'll name you off so you can rattle off where we can find you and what's coming out soon, and how we can support you. Dr. Rojas?
Yes, so I have a website that it looks beautiful, but it has a lot of broken links, just a heads up, but it's theresarojas.com, and you can find me on Instagram, either on the festival page, which is Latinx Comic Arts Fest, or my personal Instagram, which is Docteeroh, DOCTEEROH.
Great. And Gonzo?
Yeah, just go to Instagram's good for me too. J Gonzo Art. You can reach me through there. You can check out my artwork, or yeah, you can if you want to buy comics, that's where to go. Instagram's pretty much where I'm at. It's the letter J, Gonzo Art, all one word squished together.
And Darcie?
Oh yes. So you could mainly find me on Twitter. That's my big social media thing. I'm also on Instagram, but Twitter is @ShiningComic, all one word. And I need to update my website, but there's a link to my website too that has my bibliography. And thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And Frederick? We'll come back to Frederick. Hector?
Yeah, for the latest and greatest on El Paso Hero, you can go to realbravocomics.com. You can also Google El Paso Hero for any interviews like these. Thanks for the support.
Yeah. And Julio?
Yeah, you can find me at julioanta.com. You can read a few free mini comics there. I have some book announcements coming up. But until then, follow me on Twitter. It's just @Julio Anta. And Henry, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And Luke?
Yeah, I'm on probably the best place is Twitter @LukeLovesComics. It has a link to my website and everything like that. And thank you for letting me get in with this group. I feel I hope I got to make everyone else look more famous.
And Rhael?
My main social medias are Instagram, Twitter, and I have an art station and a Tapastic. I post some of my comics for free. And it's all under one username, which is Ray's Drawlings. That's RAYSDrawlings.
Thank you. And Sonya?
You can find me on Twitter at honey_child. You can also find me on Twitter at Sonya Ballantyne, but that one is not as popular. So honey, I just did it for business, just so people, when they Googled my name, would not find the honey child one first. And I also have a website, sonyaballantyne.com. It's being updated right now, but I'm also starting a blog there because I just want to get my journalism background a little up to snuff. So check it out.
Great. And I think Frederick had to exit early, but you can find him at Professor Latinx, SoulCon, The Adventures of Chupacabra Charlie. I'm Henry Barajas, the author of La Voz de Mayo. Just look up my name, Henry Barajas, or La Voz de Mayo on Instagram and Twitter. And you can also find us on the Image Comics website and the Top Cow Productions website. Nope. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having us.
And happy San Diego Comic-Con. Thank you to San Diego Comic-Con, Laura Jones, and all the amazing people in programming. And we will see you hopefully in the flesh.